It's 8:30 Central African time, and a very good morning to everyone who has dialed in. I understand something in the region of 1,000 people here in South Africa and around the world as you join us for the virtual launch of the 2021 IRMSA Risk Report. I think, everybody, it's apt that we are launching it on this Wednesday morning, just hours before the tabling of the South African budget. It is a much anticipated event in this country today, where our economic risk is going to be laid bare and addressed, hopefully positively and constructively. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, risk factors facing South Africa right now is visionary leadership. It is absolutely critical. I'm Jeremy Maggs. I'll be driving proceedings today. In the main, a series of discussions, one-on-one discussions, focusing on a number of key risk topics. What are they, you ask? Well, they include structural inequality, the economy, cyber risk, governance, health, fraud, corruption, climate, technology, and also education. And it's education which is absolutely critical. There were jobs numbers out yesterday where over 60%, I'll say that again, where over 60% of young South Africans find themselves unemployed. We are going to start with a few words of welcome from Tabili Nyaba, who is the president of the Institute of Risk Management.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Great rising to each and every one of you. Top of the afternoon, and good evening to every one of you. I'm saying this because we have risks and business professionals that are dialing in from both nationally and internationally, because that's how we roll as IRMSA. I want to welcome you to 2021 IRMSA Risk Report virtual launch. It's the very first of its kind for IRMSA. I hope you all landed softly and gratefully in 2021, which has been called a winning year, 2021. Zooming on the very same year, I just want to share with you some of the things that I'm believing are going to be coming up. The first one is we will continue to witness the organizations transforming. What I mean by that is the transformation of their business models, transformation of their operating models, how they engage with the employees, how they engage with their customers. The distribution models are already transforming. Even leadership models are transforming, and not to mention then the digital transformation. The other thing that you should be on the lookout for is the interconnectedness of risks. 2020 actually demonstrated practically to us that risks are evolving and they have multidimensional relations, and they don't materialize in isolation because they trigger others when they materialize. Some risks, as we've witnessed this, they need the global responses. And now bring it closer to home. We've witnessed the private-public partnership at play, and we believe that is the way to go. The third observation is the integration of risk, strategy, and resilience, which I call three sides of the same coin. Future thinking is the order of the day. We will be moving more towards providing, as the risk practitioners, the foresight. It's not only going to be about the hindsight or the insight, but it will be about the foresight as well, using the digital risk management for things such as the scenario planning, the stress testing, and analytics to enable the real-time decision-making and enabling the future organizations. Indeed, big data, scenario planning and modeling is going to be the part of the current future. So, we are super excited to announce the IRMSA 2021 theme of the year, Step Up with IRMSA, and now is the time. Let me take you a little bit on the memory lane. In 2019, we began our journey of being risk activists with our theme, #Impact, a year of risk activism. When we accepted the challenge, we knew that this was something bigger and that it would be something that we as the risk fraternity would have to continue to do. Going into this year, 2021, after a year that has seen how risk management has been elevated into the spotlight, we again, yet again, accepted the challenge to partner with the private and public sectors in order to transform the future of our loved country, South Africa. As risk activists, will you accept the challenge and step up with IRMSA? Now is the time to be bold. Now is the time to be courageous, to have the difficult conversations, and mostly to lead our organizations. Step up. Step up and be the voice of risk management. Step up and be the activist we need. Step up and upskill. Step up and continue with the risk management journey. I would definitely like to encourage and even challenge you, each and every one of you, to step up this year. This is our season. This is the season for risk management, without a doubt, to not only highlight risks, but identify the opportunities and possible solutions for our organizations. The risk report is a great tool for taking our organizations to the next level. As it is, as we speak right now, the risk report is in your inbox. Step up. The time is now. Winners keep moving. Step up and make the big plays. Thank you. We know we could not have done this, and we are always grateful to our sponsors who have partnered with us to host this launch. AIG, they are our main sponsor for this webinar, and AIG has partnered with IRMSA for the last few years, you guys would know, to host the Risk Report event. Thank you for your continued support, AIG. We've got the brand sponsors for the webinar, LexisNexis and Old Mutual Insure. Thank you for partnering with us.
When you're a small business owner, many things can severely affect your business. But whatever happens, we'll be there for you. And when your business thrives and grows, we'll still be there. Because at Old Mutual Insure, our business insurance is there to protect and progress the business you are today and the one you'll be tomorrow. The time is now. SMS Protect to 35442 or speak to your broker today.
That was a very beautiful ad from Old Mutual Insure. Those who know, know. Then the risk report ebook has been digitally powered by Rubikq, IntDev, and JGL Forensic Services. This is our first multimedia ebook that made possible by the partnership and the sponsors. The risk report advertisers, thank you so much to all 24 of our advertisers.
When you're
The Risk Intelligence Committee and the Risk Report Working Group, we want to thank you for the hard work and the dedication in putting this report together. To each and every one of you, please remember to complete the survey that is on the chat box and interact as we carry on with the session with your colleagues throughout the session. I am now going to hand over to Christelle Murray, who is the chairperson of Risk Intelligence Committee. From myself, enjoy the session and have a great day.
Thank you, Jeremy, and good morning, everybody. To me, it feels like the first year that I'm greeting you not only as the risk management fraternity in South Africa, The participation and the interest by the leaders across many sectors in our economy was just phenomenal. And the importance with which they regard us as risk management specialists and the contribution that we can make to the organizations and to the country is really encouraging. And it's for this reason that we must take this challenge seriously, and we must understand our roles as risk managers and as value-add partners to our organizations. You'll also recall last year that I mentioned that the way in which we read the risk report is almost more important than the actual content of the risk report. And the very nature of risk management is just of such a nature that we can't predict everything that will happen. So I would like to share my vision on how I think the risk report should be read and how it can help us as individuals, as organizations, and as a country to build a future, to own the outcomes that we face and that we leave for our children. So we start off in the risk report with section 1, which in a normal risk management language we would refer to as our risk context. What is it that we face today? What are the things that we know that has happened in the past? What are the things that worked? What are the challenges that we face going forward? And what are the things that we need to address to help us achieve our outcomes? And working from that, it's easy to then say, what are the leading scenario builders in our country think in section 2 of our report? What is it that they think about when they take what we have today and project that into the future? And how does our action as a collective today, how do we then contribute to a specific scenario coming true or not? So I would like to position risk management as a proactive tool that can help a certain scenario materialize. Now, how do we do that? If we know that certain flags or indicators are proactive or leading indicators that tells us what will happen, which scenario is busy materializing, and if we can then say which of our risks, if we manage them or if we don't manage them, will make that scenario happen or not happen. And if we understand that the risk mitigation actions that we then take contribute to a specific scenario coming true, we can as a collective and as individual organizations so much better position ourselves to contribute to what we need to happen. Now, the world is not static, and the dynamic environment in which we operate compel us that once we've made those decisions and once we've decided in our strategies how we will work towards specific scenarios coming true, anything can happen. The world can change in an instant, as we have seen with the COVID pandemic. And I still maintain that even COVID has given us much more grace and has been much more slow in the onset than some of the risks we face as a country and as the world. So taking from section 2, we know which scenarios we potentially want to happen. We then go, but what can go wrong? And like I said, some of the risks in our risk report, many will argue has already materialized. And for me, that argument is similar to saying, well, I have been in an accident, so I don't need to look out for the next one. Of course, we understand that some of those things can go much worse, and we do need to focus on them and to make sure that they don't take us further along a very detrimental path. Out of section 3, once we understand what the risks are, what the barriers are to us achieving our mitigation strategies, what the things are that we should do collectively, and also some of the key facts and figures and the success stories that we've seen with regards to some of the risks. We then ask ourselves, so for us to influence through our risk mitigation strategies, for us to influence scenarios, what are the competencies that we need? How do we as individuals in this country think about risk management? And again, we have used the SenseMaker survey this year, which talks about how people think about risk management, how we react instinctively, how we've learned out of the past, how we've applied new methodologies in terms of COVID, new ways of thinking about business interruption. And we take those competencies and we say, what has worked? What do we need to make stronger? What do we need to leverage in terms of risk management, not only for risk managers, but also in terms of the leaders of the country on a national level, provincial level, and local levels. How governing bodies and organizations should contribute, board of directors, members of independent committees. How the executive management of organizations should help to shape the future, and then how we as individual risk managers, how we then contribute to that. And lastly, as we always do, tying all of that together in section 5, asking ourselves, so what is the call to action? What are the immediate next steps that we need to take to decide which scenario we're facing as a country? And if I may, just on the scenarios, I think we need to consider how we almost apathetically as a country sometimes wait for things to happen to us. I think it is critically important for us to understand that if we maintain the current course as individuals, we have no choice but facing the perpetual hangover scenario. In that scenario, we have no choice or future chance to actually say we influence our future. And whereas last year we said fake it until you make it, our middle ground scenario has some scope for maintaining itself, we do feel this year that it cannot last very long. If we do not take ourselves out of there, we will definitely sit with two scenarios. We will either be in a perpetual hangover scenario, or we will be in a positive scenario. So last year we called the positive scenario our spring of hope. This year we have said, let's change the name of that scenario, because it's much more important for us now to take the difficult decisions, to make sure that we do the things that own our future, that helps us to create a future. Those things that we know cannot be left to somebody else, and that we've run out of time to actually to sit back and watch and wait for things to go wrong. I think in closing, a good example or a good analogy that comes through in one of our scenario builders is the analogy of a parachute or a skydiver that has jumped out of a plane. And in that time when the ground rushes up at him, how long does he have to pull the cord? And if you go past that specific point where you can no longer pull the cord, there's actually very little that you can do. And I think in South Africa we need to face ourselves, and we need to face the fact that as public sector and private entities, we can no longer operate in our own little bubbles. We need to understand that we need to work as a collective, and that we need to act now. So we are hoping that the risk report and the content on each of the specific risks, together with the views from our leaders in section 1, the scenarios, the risks themselves, the competencies that we position, and the call to action will assist us in 2021 through to 2022 to really make a difference in our country and build a society in which everybody can prosper. Thank you, Jeremy. Back to you.
And I am going to thank Christelle Marais, who is the chair of the Risk Intelligence Committee here at IRMSA, along with Tabili Nyaba, who is president of the Institute of Risk Management. Just listening to Tabili earlier, as she exhorted all of us to step up, I couldn't help but think that if we could bottle the energy that she's got and then sell it, I would make a lot of money, as would my first guest, Nicola Komenos, who is the Chief Risk Officer at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. A very warm welcome. Off comes the mask. This is what Joe Biden does. Takes the mask off. Critical, though, because we are operating in very, very difficult times. Warm welcome. Are you comfortable in the chair? There was a little bit of discussion about it first.
I'm all good.
Nicola, on a more serious note, because chairs are important, because there could be a risk there. We're here to discuss essentially structural inequality. It's a big risk facing South Africa. But the IRMSA Risk Report, which, by the way, is in your inbox right now, also points to the biggest risk facing South Africa right now is the need for visionary leadership. I'm sure you would agree with that, but the two, the structural inequality and the visionary leadership, almost go hand in hand, don't they?
No, definitely. I couldn't agree more. So I think just, first of all, I suppose we need to take a step back and just remind ourselves that the World Bank in 2019 released a report where they're showing South Africa is one of the countries in the world with the highest gap between the haves and the have-nots. We have the highest social inequality.
This is the Gini coefficient.
Gini coefficient. And essentially saying that we've got wealth and assets centered with the 10-20% of our people in the country controlling about 70-80% of the assets. And so the reality is leadership is so critical in that type of environment, because how do you make sure that you take care of the needs of the broader society, and how do you make sure that those inequalities are leveraged so that you've got economic prosperity? So I think just looking at that and the duality of our economy, we've got first world and third world country, it's in our face, we know it, we face it on a daily basis. And so I think South Africa has really been on the forefront. We've been aware of that, and specifically us as the exchange. I mean, we've, for more than 10 years, really focused on the concept of sustainability. You and I quickly chatted off camera about our previous CEO, Nikki Newton-King, and our current CEO, Leila Fourie. And there's just so much work that we need to do in our roles as leaders in the industry in financial services and as risk managers to make sure that we bridge the gap in those social inequalities. So what are the things we're doing on sustainability? How are we thinking about ESG? The E, environmental, yes, climate change, a big issue, but the S in that, the societal impact. So I'm thinking of things like the King Code. I mean, we've adopted that in our listing requirements many years ago. We've included other elements like bonds and impact bonds and social impact products. So all of those types of things, you need to bring it through in your product line, you need to bring it through in how you approach your business, and you need to encourage the leaders in society to think broader than just maximizing shareholder wealth, but also maximizing the impact to your stakeholders.
I want to pick you up on that word, encourage leaders. It's gone beyond that, though, because we can encourage all we want, but it's still not happening quick enough. How do we accelerate the process? And I want to keep bringing it back to the risk community. What role do risk managers have to play in that dynamic?
So for me, I'm reminded, there was a report released last week, the Edelman Trust Barometer report, that actually said the CEOs of organizations are the most trusted, and sorry, even trusted more than the media.
Don't even talk about the media, because the media I read the report, the media got absolutely lashed, but there was that tilt. For the very first time, there is a huge onus on chief executives to step up.
Exactly.
The trust quotient has grown incrementally.
And
Continue,
so for me, as a risk manager, it's important to say, because I've got a direct reporting line to our board, and saying to the board, look, this is what my CEO is doing. These are the conversations I'm having with my CEO to make sure that those are the things that we're focusing on. So ensuring that we leverage that opportunity that's there for the CEOs to take charge in terms of the social front. So we spoke a bit about things like what our executive is doing, like Cycling for Change a Life. That's one example. I mean, there's more very important things like public-private partnerships. We do SA Tomorrow. We internationally partner with government to make sure that we market the South African economy, and that we understand what are those structural issues where we can do hybrid financing to make sure that we have social impact projects. And I think it's a great opportunity for us at the moment, given the world is so aware of all the social inequalities that COVID has highlighted, to bring to the fore those projects that are available to be invested in South Africa.
Nicola Commonis, I love your idealism and I love your enthusiasm, and all of us would welcome that. But I'll counter that by saying at this point, many people would say it's a nice to have because so many businesses are simply in survival mode. I understand the importance of the imperative that you're outlining, but how do you find that balance? It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is challenging. I have to admit, I personally don't believe that you can survive as a business if you don't thrive within a community. So for me, they're all intricately linked. And the King Codes, yes, we talk about them, but there's a real pragmatism behind that. Because it's saying you as a business can't survive if the societies around you don't survive, if they don't also support the economy. It's all intricately linked. When we had the conversation with Dr. Suresh Khanna, he was explaining how that actually impacts the consumerist behavior and how you actually then see the direct impact on the economy. So the long and the short for me is triple bottom line is not a nice to have. It's an essential for your business to survive. It's for your long-term sustainability, making sure you focus on your people, planet, as well as your profit. And the CEO of EOH recently said he's replacing profit now with purpose, because it's saying, why do you exist? What's the reason and what value are you adding? And if you look at the next generations, the younger generations, like myself, a millennial, we will just not invest in companies that don't make an impact and don't make a difference in society.
I want you to think about the entry point into all of this, because I want to bring in now another view on structural inequality, because as you rightly say, it is critical that you reference that Gini coefficient. We can't let that gap widen, because the more it widens, the greater risk it poses to South Africa. So I want to bring into the conversation now Basani Maluleki, who is the ex-Chief Executive Officer of African Bank. She spoke to us earlier, and this is what she had to say about structural inequality.
Have such deep inequality, and as I was saying earlier, I do think that this digital divide we're talking about, has the potential to worsen that inequality. So which is a terrible thing to imagine. So, we often, or it's often written that black women in particular suffer the most from inequality because they live on the margins of society, and typically they're the worst paid or the lowest paid people in society. And we also saw that with COVID, when people started to report on unemployment, the people who were most affected were black women. And this, is obviously quite a personal thing for me. This issue around the difficulty that black women typically have in society, and I think why we should all be concerned is that typically black women raise children, and they also look after elderly parents. So the poorer that they become, the less able they are to feed those children, and with those kids suffering from malnutrition, I think educational outcomes then get worse. And it means that the talent pool that we're going to have as business to pull from in the future is going to be very diminished.
That is Basani Maluleki, the ex-Chief Executive Officer of Africa Bank. So as we draw to the end of conversation one, Nicola Commonis from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the Chief Risk Officer. Where's the starting point? How do you chip into this debate? What would a risk manager need to do in order to start tackling structural inequality?
So for me, I think it's just making sure we first of all have all the stats on the table. You've got to have the right data, the right data points. Then start having the conversation at the executive and senior levels. Make sure we've heard Christelle Marais speak a bit earlier about scenario planning and futures thinking. So make sure you've got a strategic risk workshop set up with the right level of people in the room that you tackle those
predicated
conversations.
on the Chief Executive Officer being open to that. But your argument earlier was that is starting to happen now.
Yeah, look, I think if you look at the world and where your investors are going. Your investors are demanding to see what you are doing as a business. ESG products are the forefront. It's the next opportunity. And if you don't remain relevant as a business, you will go out of business.
You're confident that we're going to get this right?
If there's enough of us that will influence the change, then we can.
It's also critical that some sort of measurement process be put in place. I hate using cliches, but it's that old management cliche that you can't manage it unless you can measure it. So how do you start managing change within structural inequality?
So I think the key thing for me is just having all of those elements embedded in your performance structure. So what are those ALTIS targets that you've put forward for your executive, your CEO, your board of directors? Is it short-term focused on their returns for this year, or is it focused on the broader impact of the business around society? And so I challenge the boards to actually relook at those metrics that they've put forward for the executives.
And Nicola Commonis, I'm going to thank you for starting a series of conversations as we launch the IRMSA 2021 Risk Report. Thank you very much for joining us. Just sit there for a moment. Our next guest, as we're going to elegantly segue from one topic to another, I'm going to introduce you to Mpho Modisani, who is Senior Manager Operational Governance at AXA. That's the Airports Company South Africa. That's up in just a moment. Just a reminder again that IRMSA Risk Report 2021 is in your inbox right now. Don't go there just yet. Watch the webinar, then go to the inbox, and it makes for salutary and fascinating reading. Welcome, Mpho Modisani. It's nice to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us today as you take off that mask. Thanks for joining us. I want to continue the conversation about structural inequality with you for a moment. But I'm going to put this opening question to everybody because the risk report highlights this year the importance of visionary leadership in terms of mitigating risk in South Africa. As I was discussing with Nicola Komenos, and I'll put the same question to you, absolutely critical that we will only address structural inequality with visionary leadership. I'm sure you agree. What's your understanding of visionary leadership?
Thank you, Jeremy. Very important. You would have remembered that in the third quarter of 2020, the consumer confidence rose to 23 for the first time in 35 years. And that also points to the fact that as leadership, we need to step up, like it was said earlier. We need to step up to say those conversations that are uncomfortable, to point out where we know that we will be crucified for pointing out, to stop saying narratives that we know that are not taking us anywhere, have not taken us anywhere in a long time. And perhaps check those theories that we've been following for all these years and go back to a simple scenario planning. To say, let's put together scenarios as leadership that point us to a direction. Let's stop trying to do predictions. Let's be realistic. Let's get into a room and sit and say, what could happen? And what is going to cause that? And as leadership, how do we contribute towards a positive result?
Paul, do you think that those people that you report to, the board, the executives, are more open to those conversations now than they were pre-pandemic? Because that's completely changed the paradigm, hasn't it?
A complete shift, Jeremy. The leadership can see the reality of being, you will see in the risk report, we are saying you are either in a perpetual hangover or you are faking it till you make it. And as leadership, we're beginning to realize that we can't keep on faking it till we make it, because what that means is that you are a crisis manager. And you know, being a crisis manager, sometimes you can get away with it for a long time because crisis is not like COVID. It's something that happens in the morning. I'm in operations. Something happens in the morning. I've got this tacit knowledge. I'm 21 years in my industry. I can think and say, okay, do this and that. Not with a pandemic. And I think that has been a big eye-opener for leadership.
So it's being able to operate on the turn of a coin, in other words.
Definitely.
But it's also predicated, I guess, on that old Malcolm Gladwell approach that you've done the 10,000 hours. More in your case, a lot more in my case, in terms of that experience absolutely counts. You're also alerting, I would imagine, your team to opportunities that come out of the risk environment that we face at the moment. It's also about looking towards opportunities. The president talking a little earlier about stepping up. How do you step up and find those opportunities?
You know, it's quite interesting, Jeremy, how we have observed businesses in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, shifting the way they used to do business before. For example, entertainment industry. They would tell you that they would sell tickets at the door as people enter. A few weeks into the pandemic, they realized that they need to step up. They're going to lose the people that used to come to the movies, because they will not come to the movies. They will not buy popcorn because they're scared for their lives. So that's what it means for one. That's a typical example of thinking of, late last year, you would remember we had the CEO of Ushaga Marine saying that, listen, we had people that would flock to our facilities. And
all of a sudden they didn't, yes.
All of a sudden, do you have on the other side an opportunity to say, you can still view the dolphins. You can pay online and you will be able to see that activity, because it is possible to do that. Not even a recording, but a live a live view of what the kind of entertainment that you are into. And I think that's what this has taught us as leadership.
It's also about finding, Mpho Modisani, the courage to do it. I put the same question to Nicola earlier. It's difficult when you've got your nose against the grindstone, just battling for day-to-day survival, to think a little bit more laterally, a little bit more creatively. How do you do that and again bring it back to the risk community that we're talking to today? How do they start to recalibrate their thinking?
You know, Jeremy, courageous leadership is about accepting when your strategy is not aligned to the risks that are presented by your immediate environment, either your internal or your external environment. As a courageous leader, you need to accept that this strategy that we're following, it's not aligned to the risks that we are facing. And what that means is that we're going to drive into a wall if we don't change the strategy. It's a very difficult conversation to have with senior leadership to say, hey, listen, guys, I know we've met for 5 days and we did this, but it's not taking us anywhere. That's what courageous leadership is.
And that courageous leadership is also having a deep understanding of the changes, as you've pointed out, in consumer behavior. And your company is at greater risk if you don't understand that. And yet, so often, organizations are blind to that change that is happening every single hour.
Definitely, Jeremy. You would have noticed our supermarkets, they were bombarded with hoarders, people who just wants to buy everything in the supermarket. Now, did the leadership think about inventory management?
I'd forgotten about that. The early days of the pandemic when everyone was chasing toilet paper.
Yes.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Did we think about inventory management? We saw China late in December the previous year struggling, but was there that opportunity to think about the toilet paper, to say we could run out of toilet paper just like other countries did? And what did we do about it? The whole supply chain, were they aware? Now that's the most interesting thing about risk management, Jeremy, that you need to look at everyone within your value chain. You can't say, I'm okay as a supermarket. Think about everyone, the people who are producing for you and so on, to say, are they aligned to my strategy?
In that respect, I want to introduce you now to Dr. Suresh Khanna, who is going to reflect on how economic growth, inequality, and customer behavior, as we've just been talking about, interact with each other, hopefully for a positive benefit.
We need a society that is hell-bent on economic growth and innovation. That's what we need, right? And if we have people that are stuck in poverty, that is just, they feel disenfranchised. And that's where the seeds of kind of unhappiness come through. And then after a while, it gets to a stage, we don't need to respect any institution, we don't need to do anything. We've had this, the fees must fall. Exactly the same kind of situation. So the circumstances are almost the same in every country. So because it's structural inequality that's there. And when young people are at their prime, when they leave school leaving or university leaving, they're looking for, it's the prime of their life. They really want to make a contribution. And imagine if they just don't have any employment. It just is not, it's not motivating to anyone. And it's anti-growth, it's anti-motivation, it's anti-society.
So, Mpho Modisani, I'm going to close off by asking you for the checklist. You've outlined the importance of understanding consumer behavior, and particularly as it pertains to structural inequality. Again, where's the chip-in point for risk managers as they digest the report, as we begin to understand what the endemic risks are facing South Africa? How do they need to start changing their short-term strategy?
Jeremy, our CROs and our risk professionals need to be realistic about something. That as business, you need to understand your immediate environment. You need to know what is influencing your environment. And if in your approach towards your strategy, you turn a blind eye to what is happening around you, you will find yourself in situations where you cannot recover as a business. The ministries within the country can try as much as possible to revive the economy, but it's all up to business. and businesses are looking up to risk professionals. So the risk reports this year, you know what I like about it the most is that there is a section on success stories to say, how were others successful? Don't tell me that this is not going to work. It's not theory. We have typical success stories. So that risk report is almost a springboard for the risk professionals to start their journey towards good strategies.
Paul Modestani, thank you very much indeed. Are you looking forward to full airports again?
Yes, definitely, Jeremy. We're ready. We have HEPA filters on the aeroplanes. We have all the gadgets.
Do you know, I haven't been to an airport for over a year.
Please.
It's the strangest thing, isn't it? I mean, so many of us, I'm sure those who are watching, we're inveterate flyers. We get on aeroplanes all the time, and I think I'm going to battle for parking. I don't even know where to park anymore.
We are so much ready for you,
Thank you so
Jeremy.
much for joining us. Paul Modestani, Senior Manager Operational Governance at the Airports Company South Africa. You're watching live from Johannesburg the launch of the 2021 IRMSA Risk Report. That document is in your inbox as I speak to you now. Our third guest is up in just a moment, someone who I have immeasurable respect for, one of the more difficult jobs in South Africa, Advocate Andy Motibi, who is the head of the Special Investigating Unit. Guess what we're going to be talking about? Fraud and corruption on the other side of this. Welcome back. Around South Africa and around the world, we're broadcasting to around 1,000 people who've dialed into this webinar this morning for the launch of the 2021 Institute of Risk Management Risk Report for this year, and it makes for very important reading. As we say in the communique, it offers a blueprint, it's a pathfinder in managing risk in 2021 and beyond. And as I keep saying, it is in your inbox, and it's work for you to do a little bit later on. I want to introduce you now. The man behind the mask is Andy Motibi, who is head of the Special Investigating Unit, and obviously we're going to take a close look at fraud and corruption in South Africa. And I think, first of all, compliments to you and your team, your hard-working team, on the work that you've done in terms of PPE, the PPE tender scandal and the investigation. It's heartfelt, isn't it? Because it shouldn't have happened.
Jeremy, thank you. Thank you very much. And greetings to you and the listeners and viewers. It shouldn't have happened. And if you recall, when we released the public report on the 5th of February, one of the journalists asked there is, in the experience that I have and that in SIU, is this, the biggest And in our assessment, this is the biggest ever, corruption investigation we've had to deal with. And we say that simply because of the costs that we are seeing being lost by government, and of course the impact that it has, particularly on the lives of the people who should have been provided with the PPEs, who have not, and ultimately the impact it has had on their lives and livelihoods. So it shouldn't have happened. It was really disheartening to see it happen, and it got relevance to what we're talking about today, in the sense that it finds its realm in the fraud and corruption category that we have put out in the risk report, and that is ravaging public sector, private sector, and the question is, what now?
Let's focus on the what now, because I don't think it's useful in the 7 or so minutes that we've got for this discussion. We know how bad the problem is. We know that in many respects it's endemic.
Right.
Let's put the intersection now between what the risk community who are watching us today should be doing in terms of fraud and corruption. Whether it's a small 20-person organization, whether it's the public sector, whether it's a large private sector corporate. Given that we have this overarching problem, what do they need to be looking out for going forward in terms of mitigation? What would your best advice be?
Right. Thank you for that question, Jeremy. Our observation, and mine in particular, as we deal with this huge endemic problem, fraud risk, corruption risk, and probably governance, poor governance in all of these sectors. It really calls, as we call for action in the risk report, it calls for risk managers to really step up. I heard our president of IRMSA saying, step up. It's a call for all of us as risk managers to step up, because what we have realized is that these processes, the risk management process, if it stepped up sufficiently to really bring out those detective or detection measures, those proactive, as we always do as risk managers, we do risk assessments, based on the business we're facing. But then it has really shown that the role of audit, as complementing the risk management process. You would recall, and I use this, COVID-19 space as an example. When the president announced, these measures to help out in the COVID, he did indicate that the Auditor General, will play a good role in terms of those proactive audits. We refer to them as real-time audits. So those, if we complement, the risk-based approach of the audit, and they become proactive enough, for our view is, and proactive in the sense that when, for example, this is mainly procurement-based, this what we are investigating in the PPEs. If the procurement process, from the onset included risk managers who would map out the risks, and the auditors who would do real-time audit, and by the way, measures in terms of segregation of duties, that you don't have one person, as we have experienced in other instances, one person being the end and the beginning and the end of the procurement process where he award contracts. So our view is, we are really called to action to review, our risk management processes such that it really assists entities and companies to detect and mitigate and put in place the control environment that we require to mitigate going forward.
Now let me ask you the tough question. I acknowledge the step up. I acknowledge the proactivity.
Right.
Has there been a reticence in the past to do that? Do risk management or risk managers not have the right processes in place, or is it a skills issue? Is it a fear issue? Because surely being a risk manager means that you have to step up all the time.
Right.
So
Indeed.
where's the deficit?
I think, Jeremy, it's probably from the skills issue and the tools of doing the work. Because we always talk about our work also being taking into account the data that we use. My colleagues before me talked about data analysis. You need appropriate tools to make sure that when you get the data of what the business has experienced, put into the appropriate tool, but you require mining it appropriately and constructively, but you require the skills to do that, right? If we talk about, in corporates out there, particularly in the banking sector, there's a more emphasis on predictive analysis. If a bank was to lend out money to borrowers and you want to determine the probability of default, if you didn't do that appropriately, you're gonna run the risk of losing money as a bank. So I'm using that example because it applies even in the public sector and wider corporates, that we need to determine predictively and use the appropriate tools and skills so that we can assist business, to identify all of these fallouts and take action where they're okay. And I'm sure we'll come back to that at a later stage to say, once they are detected and you determine all of this wrongdoing, I still say what should happen.
And hold that thought about taking action, because I think we can bring into the conversation now. Again, I want to intersect on the risk of fraud and corruption, governance and leadership. Right. And I want to bring in Letanya Johnson, who's able to talk about that critical pivot. Have a look at that, and then some concluding remarks from Andy Motibi about the taking of action, because I would also contend, and you'll agree with me, that it is also up to the risk managers to be the guiding light. Indeed. In that respect. But let's listen now to Letanya Johnson.
Jeremy, if I must be honest, all 12 of those risks resonate with me, because all 12 is what we currently consider in our own risk response strategy. But if I had to single out one of the risks, it's really around unified and ethical visionary leadership. And I think the reason why that is so important is that, for me, that's at the pivot of everything else that flows from that. If you think about the challenges we're currently facing in South Africa around many of the issues that are before the State Capture Commission, etc., it boils down to ethical leadership. And I think it's important that not just when you look at it from a government perspective, but also in the private sector, that we need to make sure that we have the right cultures in place, and that the conduct of both, not just the leadership, but also the broader, I think, organization actually aligns to that. From our perspective, what I've considered, if you think about our own internal strategy, is that we must create environments where people can speak up when they see unethical leadership. If you consider many of the testimonies currently, a lot of it is things that I think many of the professionals would have seen it, but was there a conducive environment created and a culture that allows people to speak up without fear of victimization?
Okay, Letanya was talking to me a little earlier.
Right.
It's about creating. We'll get to the taking of action in just a moment, and I'm going to steal a few more minutes from this particular interview, because this is important, because fraud and corruption is endemic in this country. She talks about creating the right culture within an organization, private, public sector.
Yes.
What do risk managers need to do in order to create that culture? Well, first of all, what is the culture?
Yes.
And then how do they create it?
Jeremy, at the moment, for me, in the business that I do, the assessment of what I've done, amongst others, and this is probably societal in nature, is that there has been a culture of impunity, right? And this is more on, all of these wrongdoers that keep on doing wrong things. The culture of impunity has to stop. And what is it that, as risk managers and governance practitioners, can do? And the other culture really is this one that she spoke of, that we need an open culture where good men and women will speak out, without fear of victimization, So for me, as risk managers, we need to contribute to that culture when we do the risk assessments. It should be on an integrated basis. Make sure that all employees at all levels are included, but in particular at a board level, CEO level, executive level, you need that culture open. Because as risk managers, the extent to which the boards and the executives are open to what we find as risk managers, the assessments, and they are receptive to those is very important.
With the understanding that that culture is not going to be inculcated instantly. You're going to have a lot of pushback.
Right.
It is the most difficult thing to do, isn't it?
Indeed. Jeremy, it's the most difficult thing to do, and that's where leadership now, it's critical. The ethical leadership and just the leadership to want to see governance, good governance, and successful entities, whether in public or corporate. So that's where, whether at a shareholder level, at a board level, at an executive level, we require leadership that will enable that culture. I used to be a group operational risk manager in corporate, and where you reported directly to the board. And if you find really that the board is so committed to ensuring that risk management is implemented and managed in a manner that seeks to assist the corporation to achieve its objective, you find that you do your work effectively. But another important part is that the regulatory environment, whether public or private, the regulators have to step up as well in terms of monitoring, in terms of ensuring that where there's infractions by all of these corporates, appropriate regulatory actions are taken, so that more often the boards and the executives open their eyes and step up when they know that the bottom line is at risk, right? But of course it shouldn't only be that. We require, as we say in the risk report, let's own our future, right? And we would like to own our future in all of those aspects, whether it's risk management to mitigate fraud and corruption, risk management to integrate the governance and all of these aspects that contribute to just a good corporate citizen, and to ensure that regulators also come to the party.
You need to give me a quick answer because time is always against us,
right.
Unfortunately. You've done sterling work in terms of this PPE corruption scandal. Do you think we're at an end now? Is there more to come? Are we going to see another Andy Mothibian news conference where you're outlining the same set of problems? Have we overcome this?
We have not overcome it, Jeremy. As the investigations are still ongoing, and we are continuing to uncover, wrongdoing, maladministration, and corruption. And the point I was pointing on earlier is that, as we investigate, we continue to give reports to the president and to the other state institutions. But of importance, is to make sure that whenever we uncover those wrongdoings, what should happen? Action. Consequence management. I still say consequence management is key, and we are going to deter all those would-be corruptors and maladministrators, civil recoveries, take all those wrongly acquired or corruptly acquired assets, strip them off, turn them into money, back into the state, prosecute the wrongdoers, and keep out the officials or anyone who's guilty of misconduct and contributing to all of these corrupt activities. That is how we're going to win the war. If we just continue to investigate and no actions, that culture I spoke of impunity, we will be contributing to that.
And let me suggest to all the risk professionals who have been watching this conversation that you are the frontline soldiers.
Indeed.
In that respect. It's difficult. It's not just identifying the risk. It's not just preempting. It's also about stepping up. It's about taking action. Andy Mothibi, it's always a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Again,
Jeremy.
there's more on that topic in the risk report I keep saying it to you, it's in your inbox. Go to it the moment we have finished this vital webinar as we launch the 2021 Risk Report. I've got two more important conversations coming up. In just a moment, we're going to look at the risk of economic recession, risk in education, a youth in South Africa under increasing pressure. I also want to talk about disruptive technology and extreme weather events. That's still to come as our launch report event continues. Welcome back. Our conversation continues. We have two more guests with us today, and I'm going to introduce now the Manager Risk Management Support at the National Treasury of South Africa, Tokelwa Nonko. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're a big fan of Andy Mothibi as well. He's doing magnificent work, isn't he?
True.
So important. He was talking about stepping up, and it's all about consequence management, which is absolutely critical. But you're not here to talk to me about investigations. We're going to talk about the recession that we find ourselves in at the moment, the inherent risk that a recession brings to South Africa, and as I said at the introduction of this webinar, we talk on an important day today because we have the budget this afternoon being delivered by the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni. Who'd want his job? I don't know. But the risk of economic recession is going to be with us for a long time.
It is, Jeremy. It is. And unfortunately, it has impact on many other risks. So, and we are not in a position where we can afford to ignore such a risk. So I think it's important. It's well done that it has been flagged on the IRMSA Risk Report. And just to give insight, I think it's also as risk managers, it's important to understand the impact it has, because if you look at our fiscal, we are not collecting as much because businesses are out of business. Yes, and which affects then the government responsibility for social. For what they do socially.
So it's a real domino effect.
Yes, and also if you consider the debt we have, I mean, we're relying on the tax policy to do our social responsibilities and to also try to pay off our debt. And as Andy Mothibi has mentioned, that there is massive corruption. So the fiscal is already so much under pressure. There's these things that we need to do as government, and then there's corruption as well.
So how do risk managers need to change their thinking then in that respect?
Okay, I think traditionally what risk managers do is they sort of highlight the risks and they report the risks, and then they leave you to deal with it.
So there's the data, there's the report. Thank you very much.
We're going to look what else is bothering us.
That doesn't exist anymore.
It shouldn't exist anymore. So I think what the risk managers need to do is understand the content as well, understand the impact, understand how it leads to other risks. Because another risk, for example, I'm just making an example, there's education. We have problems with education where people can't access education because they don't have online access. They're too poor to buy computers. And although there are government program outreaches, they don't get there on time.
And that's been reflected in the matric results, which were out 2 days ago.
Yes.
Nationally down 5 percentage points. Might not sound a lot, but that's a problem. And that is a direct result of a lack of access to technical infrastructure and to data.
True.
Yeah.
And it also reflects that in poorer areas like the Eastern Cape, they're struggling to get 70% even now because of
Correct.
the conditions there. So this is the direct impact of the economy. And it's also flipping on the other side. If we, in the long term, if we don't deal with education, we are never going to deal with inequality.
Let's park education for a moment. I just want to come back to the thread that risk managers have got to finish. We got to the point where they were identifying problems, they were handing over, and they were stepping back in many respects. That paradigm has changed now.
Yes.
What's the next step then for risk managers, in your opinion?
So, okay, when I touched education, I wanted to put a point forward that they need to understand that is, they need to understand the impact. They need to know that the statistics. They need to know the data. They need to know who to speak to. Traditionally, like I say, you will speak to your CEO or your manager or your DG, as we call it in our departments. But now we are looking outside the department as well. We need to build relations and bring people in to assist with this risk, because sometimes it's not only
So
up to
what sort of people? Data analysts? Do we?
No. I mean, we need to form relations. Remember, we are risk. We analyze risk. We need those datas, that data. We analyze risk. We understand it. Now we need to communicate it better than just identifying and handing it over. So when we want more understanding of this risk and what it takes and whether we would do it, whether it would be dealt with in a short term or long term, we need to bring experts. So for example, okay, Treasury is a bad example because we've got economists. So if you are in Department of Health, for example, you need to understand how the economy would affect health. So you need to expand the communication to the likes of your economists outside the institutions, like your treasuries.
So it's a question, as the president of IRMSA was saying, it's about stepping up, but it's more than that in many respects. It's stepping up with a purpose and a real understanding of a cooperative relationship among more stakeholders.
Precisely.
That has changed the job in many respects of risk managers going forward, hastened, I guess, by the pandemic.
Sorry?
It's changed the job of risk managers
Yes,
in many ways, or the approach of risk managers.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now obviously we have to do more than we normally understood we need to do. So step out and step out. So which means we are the organizational risk managers. So we need to step up in the organization and step out of the organization to bring in more credible information.
So what new skills do you need?
People skills, management skills. I mean, if you are a risk person, you are inclined. You need the ability to bring people in, to convince people that they need to do certain things to treat this risk, and to convince people that how important the risks are. So I think management skills, you need to manage those people, and people skills, you need to interact with those people.
Isn't it about also explaining to all the different stakeholders within that dynamic that you're talking about how important risk management has become? I've had a long association with this industry. There's always been the criticism that it's on the margins. We'll call you when we need you. It's now a question of becoming central to that entire debate. Your industry, your sector has got a lot of work to do in that respect. You've got to shout louder.
Yes, you need to be involved, because if I can tell you, if you're a specialist in the economy, I need to walk beside you, because I really can't tell you what to do. You know better, but I can bring the expertise expertise to actually teach you how to have foresight of these things so that you understand exactly what the impact is and how important it is to mitigate these risks.
It's like conducting an orchestra.
Yes, so many different instruments, but they need to sink in together for good music, of course.
So you've heard it, everybody. You've got to become the conductors of orchestras as you go forward in 2021. I've got a keen eye on the clock. I want to talk about this as we start to conclude. I mentioned at the very beginning the unemployment statistics that were released yesterday. And the number that frightened me more than anything, over 60% of young South Africans are unemployed. So we have an official, I think we're sitting at 32.5% generally, but it's the youngsters. So in other words, under the age of 30 that find themselves unable to find jobs. That in itself, this army of unemployed youngsters, that in itself is posing a huge risk, is it not? I'm assuming Treasury would be concerned about that.
Of course, like I said in the beginning, there is a link. So there's a link to education. So these youngsters have hope that when their only hope is actually education. So if I pass my matric, I would get a job. If I pass my diploma, I'll get a good paying job, but it's not happening because of the economy and the threats to access of education. And these also bring more, we have what we call parent risk and child risk. They bring more child risk. So if youth is unemployed, we're gonna start seeing crimes. We're gonna see violent crimes. We're gonna see theft.
Well, we've seen that already, aren't we?
I mean, more of it. I mean, the more the percentage goes up of unemployment, the more these crimes
So
will
bring
go
it
up.
back to risk professionals. How do they factor that in, and how do they mitigate against that? It's almost impossible, isn't it?
In a long term, in a long term, it's impossible. Obviously, we're not going to immediately turn around the crime rate, and our police force is also stretched a bit. It has a bit of a responsibility. So in a long term, that's why in the beginning, and I'm going to say it again, these are interlinked. So if we try and fix the economy, then indirectly we are fixing these other risks. Obviously, there are social responsibilities where there's grants and everything, but I mean, I'm working and I can hardly breathe in Masareli. Who will live on 350? I mean, that's a motivation to go and commit crime. So again, they have hope again of education, which these people, the poor people who are actually struggling with this, can't even access education because of the pandemic. So it's a bigger conversation. We need to actually see what we need to fix other risks. Some are long term, like I said, we can't immediately fix them, but we need to fix something so that indirectly it faces the risk of the unemployment youth. And yeah.
You've made some absolutely critical points. It's also about, it's eating the elephant one bite at a time.
Yes.
You're not going to solve this immediately. Totelwa Nunko, thank you very much indeed from National Treasury. You manage a risk management support at the Treasury, and good luck with the budget this afternoon.
Thank
you very much for doing this. Don't know if you've noticed, but over Gauteng last week, there was a dreadful smell of sulfur. Part of it was blamed on what the Met Office calls disruptive weather. Weather is a big risk going forward. The environment, the green economy. We spoke a little bit earlier about ESG principles, E standing for environment. I'm going to look at that in just a moment, as well as the role of disruptive technology in risk management as our webinar continues.
Yesterday and days before, sun is cold and rain is hard. I know, been that way for all my time. To forever, on it goes. For the circle, fast and slow. I know it can stop. I wonder. I wanna know. Have you ever seen rain? I wanna know. Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day?
Welcome back. In the past hour or so, we have covered, haven't we, the full gamut of risks facing South Africa, all contained in IRMSA's Risk Report 2021. Again, to remind you, you've got the report. You'll look at that a little bit later. But the key risk factor, the thing that is worrying executives in South Africa right now is this thing about a lack of key visionary leadership. And it's interesting, as we've had these conversations, leadership has threaded its way through all of those particular factors. Our final guest this morning is Christopher Palm. He is the Chief Risk Advisor at the Institute of Risk Management South Africa. Chris, we're going to talk about two issues. One is extreme weather events. Neither of us are meteorologists. At least I know you reasonably well. I don't think you're a meteorologist. But also the importance of disruptive technology. Critical issues, perhaps shunted to the margins because of all of the other risk factors facing executives right now. But I want to set the scene very quickly. The Chief Executive Officer at FNB, Jacques Salier, spoke to me a little earlier, and he sets the scene for us. So let's listen to what he has to say, then we'll pick up the conversation.
All of a sudden there's an urgency, and it's the same with the energy challenges that we had faced with Eskom's, sort of challenge, where people sort of relied on that availability of physical environments. And when those lockdowns happen, or when the the electricity blackouts happen, people then have to adapt to new tools. So we as the phrase goes, never waste a crisis. We've actually expedited many of our strategies, and we've enjoyed that. Okay, so that's the one element. But I think strategically, our whole country and our economy will challenge to keep momentum, right, and to keep growth going, because ultimately that's the strategy that is hard for us to solve. It's not the technology tool sets anymore. It's about how do we keep, how do we solve unemployment, and how do we keep people going, and how do we create the foundation for the economy to flourish? Because without that, it doesn't matter what tool you've got, it won't help.
You are a brand that is known for innovative thinking. That's a given. Have you become more innovative as a result of this, and perhaps more creative in terms of your execution?
Yeah, so we love this. Internally, even there were areas that hung onto the old tools, right, and they've all been incentivized now to adapt and to adjust. So our story goes. It's actually quite simple to explain it. It's like there was an old way of doing retail, and there's a new way that Amazon is showing us, right? And there was an old way to do information, and then now there's a Google way of doing information. There was an old way of doing music, and now there's a Spotify way of doing music.
I'd forgotten, Chris, how fascinated I was when I spoke to him about that pineapple lamp that he was sitting next to. Why are we raising weather as a risk issue?
I think, Jeremy, this has been before COVID. It was part of the World Economic Forum risk radar for many, many years. Climate change, extreme weather patterns, and then, of course, associated with that, droughts, floods, fires, and the like. And similarly, again, referencing World Economic Forum, they highlighted pandemics. So I think this is a question of having learned from having had the grey elephant in the boardroom. Pandemics probably...
which everyone kind of ignored when it was raised,
yes,
wasn't it? Yeah.
I was going to say, making a contentious statement cannot be considered a black swan, because we've known about it. If I'm not mistaken, World Economic Forum reported on this for at least 8 years in a row, speaking about pandemic. But let me tell you, you as a chief risk officer, try and put that onto a risk report or a profile or a radar to have a debate at a board level, very difficult to have achieved that.
So, Chris, how do you force the issue then?
And I think, so on the back of COVID-19, having showed that up, having showed that there were some of us that put the pandemic on the radar, not had airtime to actually deal with it, not even as far as business continuity management goes, all of a sudden, we have now leverage. We have a platform to bring in things like extreme weather. And also, just linking back to COVID-19, and I don't want to make it the conversation, but this is such a cool leverage for taking these types of risks forward. And why? Because disruptive technologies, we've seen the benefit. As a matter of fact, we adopted that within less than 9 months, if you think about it. Maybe not the whole gambit, but at least digitization, digital platform usage, and the like. And similarly,
we are talking about disruptive technology within the dynamic of disruptive technology, aren't we?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, 2 years ago, we would not have been doing this. We would have been at a live event with X hundred number of people engaging. It's different, and it's become the norm now.
Yes, of course, this has become acceptable. Some years back, this would not have been acceptable. Face-to-face was the norm. Face-to-face was the quality. Now we're doing differently. And so here, with the link of disruptive technology to extreme weather, we have seen the benefits. Yes, we can argue, but right in the first 6 months of lockdown, globally, people were posting videos of the ozone layer and the oceans and the like and the beaches and that sort of thing. So I think, Jeremy, the bigger message today, and that's why the risk report, I think, is so valuable here, is that we firstly have the platform to now start driving those risks, those 1 in 100 years risks, but we don't know when that 1 year is. It could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years down the line. So use that to get the message across. Cyber, disruptive technologies, extreme weather. And
let's park disruptive technology for a moment. I just want to come back to the extreme weather, if we can. This is what I'm worried about, is that the pandemic has opened the way for broader discussion, but there is a danger, given that we're in survival mode when it comes to business, that as we start to come through this, and there's indication around the world that vaccination programs are working, ours has started in South Africa, Christopher, that this just slips back down the agenda again. You're talking to risk managers today. How did they keep issues like extreme weather and I guess disruptive technology on the agenda? Because at some point, chief executives will say, yeah, okay, but what is more important is this.
Yeah.
That's your job. How do you do that?
Yeah. So I think a couple of the speakers before this morning have referenced predictive capability, has spoken about using data for better decision making. And I think in that lies the crux. In that lies the skills that the risk profession has to bring to the table that we can make available to leadership. We've been talking about visionary leadership and the whole morning, but to bring that to the leadership so that they could make quick and quality decisions around climate change Let me just also
Better
add to that.
interpretation of data. In other
Yes.
words. And that's been a deficiency in the
I
past.
firmly believe that, and it's not limited to extreme weather. It's probably something the risk profession in general needs to bring to the table. We've had masterclasses with ASA, the Actuarial Society, where we are trying to understand how to use the quantification element of information to assist leadership to make those visionary decisions. So decision-based data is what we are after. And I think, Jeremy, if I may just use this to say, and that is why IRMSA currently talks about integrating strategy, risk, and resilience. Because we just don't need to rescue a bad decision. We need to support the making of excellent decisions. And that comes back to the point that I've made. Whether it's extreme weather, whether it is decisions around our consumer behavior that changes, our education system, that's what we are all about, and that's what we should get to.
So in our remaining 60 seconds or so, what's the call to action then?
So firstly, IRMSA working with our partners in coming up with an integrated strategy, risk and resilience guideline. This guideline is aimed at achieving, I call visionary leadership the pivot in our risk report, and it's very important that we consider that, because what is a pivot? A pivot is that risk that if we change this one risk, it's got a pervasive effect on the rest of the risk profile. And of course, that's why we made that our number one risk in the report.
But it's interesting because visionary leadership is predicated on making, as you say, the right decisions. The right decision is predicated on the data. It's up to your constituency to make sure that you have the right data and the correct interpretation. That's how important this profession is in terms of that visionary leadership.
Yes, of course. And therefore, if I can just reflect on the risk report, parts of those tools are really well explained in our risk report. So our report is very different to the other more global reports. Our report is reacting to a very South African need to elevate the risk profession to step into this breach that we've seen the value proposition of in the last 20, 24 months.
I'm going to leave it there. Christopher Palm, thank you very much indeed. The Chief Risk Advisor for the Institute of Risk Management South Africa. The report is critical. It's an important read. It's in many ways a survival blueprint, I think, for business this year, as we also come to terms with the real reality of COVID-19 and its long-term and abiding impact. Folks, we're going to close the session today with the Chief Executive Officer of IRMSA, Gillian Lacordia. I can see her out of the corner of my eye, prepping and getting ready, and she's up next.
Wow. Thank you so much to everyone for a phenomenal morning. I think what you'll find is that the risk report should be in your inbox, and now that we've positioned how we put the risk report together, you've heard the conversations, now we need you to go and read and have a look and take it to your boards, take it to your teams, and have the discussions with your executives. This is a very strong conversation starter and a very strong foundation for the work that you will need to do for the year. I would like to really thank our sponsors. Days like this, I mean, we've never ever, I'm not sure if you all know, but we had 940 people in attendance today. And that is a record number for the Institute of Risk Management South Africa. So well done to everyone. I'd like to thank our main sponsor, AIG, who sponsored the webinar, LexisNexis and Old Mutual Insure for being fantastic brand sponsors. We know we cannot do events and webinars and thought leadership sessions without that support. And then, of course, the ebook. So when you now get that link and you click on it, and you're going to open this really snazzy ebook. Look, it must be the immaturity in me that comes out that every time I turn a page electronically, it makes a little noise, and then it's beautiful to look at. I would like to thank RubiQ, EntDev, and JGL Forensic Services for actually sponsoring the ebook. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and an easy way to read and to work through. It doesn't need time to load, so I think you're going to enjoy it again. We had 24 advertisers in the risk report, and that is phenomenal support from our stakeholders that we work with. Thank you for doing that for us, because it takes a lot of work and effort to be able to put that together, and we really do appreciate it. So all of you, I can't say all 24, but you know who you are, and there they are on the screen as well. So thank you very much. I have to thank our Risk Intelligence Committee, chaired by Christelle Marais, our chairperson. This is a huge project, and we've got a risk report working group who haven't stopped. I mean, I'm on the working group WhatsApp group, and the messages that have been flying for quite a few months, and every day, every night, edits. So thank you so much, Christelle. And then, of course, to Christopher Palmer, our Chief Risk Advisor. It's been blood, sweat, and tears. This morning, Christopher arrives, and as normal, it's, oh my gosh, we should have done 3 other things. And it's like, just let it go. Let it go, because every year there's 3 more things we should have done, or 4 more things we should have done, and we pull it into the next year, but there's always going to be something. So well done, Christopher, Christelle, and to the full Risk Intelligence team. You guys have been wonderful. And then, of course, the subject matter experts. You'll see that we've had amazing experts. I absolutely love the idea of the videos and having the conversations, that people could hear the conversations that we've had. That was brilliant. And so there we go, to the Risk Intelligence Committee, something very fresh and new. And I think we'll be able to continue to listen to those conversations by linking through that risk report. So excellent initiative. And using that digital space that we really find ourselves in at the moment, I thought, they've just taken it and they've pushed that even further. So well done. And thank you to the subject matter experts, because it did take time out of their very busy diaries. And then to 5 to 9 for helping us create this ebook. We really value your partnership. And then, of course, Jeremy Maggs, who ended up being an editor for the risk report as well, and for being here today and supporting us on our journey, especially after a year that we have found to be really different and difficult for so many people. The conversations have been so valuable. And then, of course, our IRMSA team. Well done to be able to put an event like this together, supporting the various committees that are working on the risk report, to register over 900 people. All I could think last night was, thank God we didn't have to do name tags, because that would have been something else. But I must say, though, we would have loved to have all 940 people in the room having a coffee and a tea and really sharing. So hopefully by next year, this time, we will be in a room together. And so the thought that I need to leave you with is a thought that our chairperson, our president, Tabilia Nyaba, who started our morning so beautifully with so much energy and the magic that she brings to the Institute, is how do we step up? How do we take our next step? Our organization, what are you going to do to step up? How are you going to step up when it's now is the time in this country? You listen to our Vice President, Andy Matibi, and what they are doing. How do we support them to step up in the country? How do our organizations work forward? How do you step up and take that next step on your career path as a risk professional? How will you step up in 2021? I need you to take that and think about it. We look forward to seeing you at our future sessions that are coming up. Our team have got the most incredible things lined up for the year, and we cannot wait to share. And I thank our partners and our members for just being there and constantly on this path of IRMSA. I thank you for that. And we will continue as an institute to step up. Thank you.